All right. Hope you all had a good weekend. Welcome to another week, if your week starts on a Monday. I just wanted to start with a story. And this happened last week. I think it was not that long ago. I always forget things like how long ago they were. I think this happened Thursday or Friday. But yeah, anyway, I recently brought on some new therapists into the practice. And one of the kind of functions you have to do as part of the onboarding process is you have to, obviously you have to onboard someone, right? But when you are hiring someone, you have to put down a work location for them. Right now, if you are an in-person provider with an office space, the work location is clearly going to be the address of the office space, wherever that is. But because we're an all virtual practice, the work address is often the therapist's home address. And I tell you this because when that address is in another state, there's a whole bunch of things you have to do as a business. And I'm still not 100% clear on all of it all the time because it's so nuanced, and that's part of this story. But when you hire someone who's working in another state, you basically have to figure out how to register your business in that state. And registering your business, although I wish it was very simple, like clicking a button or something like that, it's often very complex. It often requires talking to an accountant, sometimes talking to a lawyer, all sorts of stuff to kind of figure out, how do I register? Like, do I have to register as a foreign entity? Do I register as a domestic entity? There's a lot going on there, right? So whenever I hire someone who lives in another state, this is the process I go through. It often takes me a little while. I've got to make calls and figure things out. So anyway, that being said, I was in the process of trying to figure out how to register my business in another state. And I was not getting any clear answers, right? So I first asked the accountant, and he told me, I'm not really sure. There's a lot of different laws around that. It might, I think you have to do it this way. He's like, but you have a registered agent. So why don't you, that's kind of their specialty. They'll be able to help you out. I said, okay. I have a registered agent. And basically a registered agent is, it's basically kind of like an entity that you kind of have for your business. They accept mail for you. They can act as kind of like an address for you, not a business address, but and they do other things as well, but not to bore you. But anyway, the registered agent is supposed to be someone who knows about how I'm supposed to register my business in another state, right? Again, this is all stemming from hiring someone who lives and works in another state. So I call up the registered agent and I say, hey, listen, I just hired someone. They live in this state. I need to figure out how to register my business. Well, they said, we're happy to register your business, but you have to ask the accountant what type of registration you need. Do you need to be a domestic entity or a foreign entity? And I said, well, I don't know. I asked the accountant. He told me to ask you. And they said, well, we're not able to make that decision for you. And, you really have to kind of figure it out and, let us know, but we're happy to get you registered. So, oh my gosh, now I'm like, who is going to help me? How am I supposed to figure this out? So I go back to the accountant and I say, hey, listen, I went to the registered agent. They don't know. They told me they can help me register, but they're not exactly sure how or which one I need. And then the accountant said, okay, fine. Why don't you call the Secretary of State? There's an ambulance. Can you hear that? I think there's a fire truck back there. Anyway, he said, call the Secretary of State in the state that you need to register your business. Tell them. Oh yes, and the other part I forgot to mention is I actually registered my business online. However, I registered incorrectly. So although most people, the people I'm talking to, can't assure me of exactly the way I'm supposed to register, they're almost sure that I registered incorrectly. I registered as a domestic entity, meaning like my business is established in that state. And what they were saying is I should have registered as a foreign entity, meaning my business is established in another state, but we do business in that state, right? If you're confused, me too. Anyway, so I call up the New Jersey Secretary of State. Goes right through to someone, right? Get on the phone with this guy, and he says, hey, I give him a little bit of the context, and he said, oh yeah, you definitely did it wrong. He was so sure so quick. And then I was like, the reason I'm doing this is because I am a group practice and I do this and that. I have a therapy business. Some of my staff live in other states, And then he said, oh, well, I'm actually not sure what you need to do. You need to call this number. So, more phone numbers to call, right? So I call that phone number. How long do you think I was on hold for? This is not the longest amount of time in the world, but I was on hold for 110 minutes. Right? That's an hour and a half. Right? That's longer than an hour and a half. Right? And so I get on, it finally goes through to someone. And it registers as I make that call, and this person answers the phone. I don't really know what I'm asking. I don't really have any details other than I've hired someone, they live in this state, I'm a therapist, I have a group practice, and I need to register my business, and I don't know which one to choose. So lo and behold, I give this person that information, and they told me that they don't know either, and I need to call the accountant. I got to go back to the accountant, right? And now I'm beside myself. I've started with the accountant. I went to the registered agent. I called the Secretary of State for the state I need to speak to. And all of that has taken now several hours, right? At least 3 total, right? All this and going back and forth. And the whole thing, I have to register the business in this state. And so that has to get done, yet there's no concrete answer or steps to take. And so I'm really frustrated, I don't know where to turn. So anyway, I turned back to the accountant, and he said, you know what, let's just set up a call together. So we set up a call together, and then that call was actually really helpful. He was able to walk me through why it's kind of like this gray, nebulous area, why the answers aren't so concrete. He shared with me that every state considers doing business in their state different from all the others, right? So for example, if I'm registered in New York, right? That's where I am. And I am licensed, let's say in, I don't know, North Carolina. And we see clients who are in North Carolina. North Carolina gets to decide basically what constitutes as doing business in their state. Right? This has nothing to do with licensure. This has everything to do with rendering services across state lines. So does that mean that I've now conducted business in North Carolina? If so, I need to be taxed appropriately, right? It's all confusing, but the accountant basically told me that every state has different rules and regulations for how they determine what doing business is. And he said it's always changing. A lot of times people don't really know. You have to ask a lawyer who has to interpret the law. And at the end of the day, what he basically told me was, I'm almost certain this is what you need to do, which was register as a foreign entity. But I'm not 100% certain. I don't know if anyone is 100% certain given the complexities. Now, that was enough to help me understand what I needed to register as a foreign entity, right? At the same time, though, it had me thinking about this notion in it's not just being a private practice owner, but in any small business, is that there's so many things that are gray areas, right? And so many things that require a degree of risk, right? So let's just use the assumption that we're almost certain I should register as a foreign entity, but there's still a little bit of uncertainty as to whether or not that's correct. Now, I don't know if anyone can tell me for sure, given the complexities and the fact that everything's changing. So in that regard, there's always some degree of risk, right? And this had me thinking as well, when you are a therapist, there's nothing you can do to 100% guarantee that you will never have an audit, right? You can do all that you can, but sometimes an audit gets triggered outside of your control. So if you take insurance as a therapist, you're living with some degree of risk. And if someone says, hey, take these steps, it's going to prevent an audit, likely, there's still that small chance that it might, you might trigger an audit somehow. And so a couple of things just had me reflecting on was how hard it is for me to kind of live in this kind of gray area, right? Where we're almost certain that you should do the foreign entity, but not 100%. That just gives me a lot of unease, right? I just want someone to say, this is what you need to do. These are the steps you take. Let's go for it, right? But in this case, it's, we're almost sure you should take these steps. Not 100% sure. There's a little bit of risk. And, that's how it is, right? And so, and I know this kind of transcends other areas, audits, right? just starting a business in general, there's a lot of like gray areas, no black and white. You get to run around a lot. And I think in some regard, it just highlighted how hard that can be. And I'm assuming, I would guess that's hard for a lot of people, especially you in private practice, right? If you're watching this, you're in private practice yourself. I don't know, is it hard for you to kind of, navigate those nebulous gray areas? It is for me. And then the other thing was the idea that kind of with these gray areas, there's kind of like that idea that we're kind of always living with some degree of risk, right? And I think that's one thing that's hard about private practice. There's always like a degree of risk. I don't know, like, again, you can use audit as an example, right? If you take insurance, there's always some small degree of risk. Even if just going into your own private practice, there's a degree of risk that, like you are responsible for maintaining a caseload. Like, there's like, you can do things to build it and to be good at it. But there's no 100% guarantee, right? There's no do this, this, and this, and it will work out all the time. So it also had me kind of thinking about the discomfort of that, living with a degree of risk. I thought that story just highlighted it all, right? And then on top of it, just so much time dedicated to, those kinds of things. And I do think, like, I don't know, if I was better at being in the gray area, would I have saved myself some of those phone calls? If I was, maybe better at taking risks, would I have saved myself? And at the end of the day, I wouldn't have changed anything I have done. I think I shared in a couple of videos past that, this process, although it took me a long time and I'm still kind of going through it, but those hours spent researching, going back and forth, I now have a much better understanding of what it is I'm doing than I did before. This is kind of part of that, becoming your own expert. I feel like I learned a lot, but really had me reflecting on that stuff. And I'd love to know for you, like, those kind of the gray areas, which ones are hard for you? What kind of is risk-taking hard for you? Do you find this to be risk-taking, owning your own business? I'd love to know your thoughts. I'm just sharing some of my genuine thoughts. That's what I wanted to talk about today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video.